All right, all right. Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. I am Charles Altendorf. I am your moderator for this session. And bonjour from Versailles. Anyway, today we have with me a very special friend. But first, let me get into the sponsor for this session. The sponsor is Precision Products, and I have worked with Eric Muncie before. They have all your GPS collection needs, and they have the highest quality of technology available today. So give them a call at Precision Products. They're based in Louisville. And today with me is a very special friend. His name's Kenny Ratliff, and he is from Oldham County Water. And as you all are, I'm sure, aware, we both are presidential candidates this year. So, anyway, what's that saying about keeping your friends close and your enemies closer or something like that? I don't know. But anyway, we'll go ahead and let Kenny get into it today. He's going to be talking to you all about um, the Oldham County waters, the public outages in the water system. So over to you, Kenny.
Hey, thank you, Charles. Appreciate it very much. Let me get swapped up here. Appreciate that introduction, and good afternoon to everyone and attending. And I said it in my video, you're not going to go wrong with whoever my competition was, and not knowing who it was for the presidential race there. Charles, you can't go wrong with him as well. So I stand by that statement, not knowing who was running initially, but look forward to what happens with that. So again, thank you for joining. If I'd known that I was going to be following Byrne from Esri, I might have opted out for one of those sleepy slots later in the day, but he's a hard act to follow, so very good content. Going to run through this fairly quickly. I don't know that it'll take the full 30 minutes, and there's nothing earth-shattering here or something you probably haven't seen or worked with in terms of processes. But we have issues with our water system here, and this created a problem for us in terms of getting the information out to our customers, and that prompted the product or the workflow that you're going to see here shortly. So thanks to Precision for sponsoring this session and all the great work they do year-round with camp and outside of camp. So let's jump into the content. So I defer to story maps now as opposed to slides, so hopefully this all works. So just a little bit quick background. Most of you know Oldham County. We are up here northeast of Jefferson County. Even though that we're right next to Jefferson, we are still considered a rural water system, which means that we have less than 10,000 customers in terms of meters. Our wells are located down here in the Westport area alongside of the river. We do not draw water from the river itself. We actually draw them from wells that about 130 feet deep on average. Then we pump through quite a bit of gallons in terms of capacity. We have 13 tanks where we store that throughout our service area that you can see here. The nice thing about not consuming or not producing water from the river is that we have the natural sand and filter system in our aquifer, and I think the aquifer at last as a pre-treatment for water quality, but then we certainly treat it at our treatment plant there in Westport as well before providing it to the customers. And our aquifer is slated in terms of geological time. We can go, I think, at least 300 years the last time we checked before we would impact any type of lessening water in terms of production. So our problem statement, if you will, the laws for water, public water systems include provisions for boil water advisories. And a boil water advisory can occur if you have a break in a system, natural or man-made. We have a lot of contractors that forget to call us to mark our system infrastructure, and they'll run a pipe or a drill, something like that, a backhoe through a water pipe. Other times we have pipes that are sitting on bedrock from older installations as opposed to bedded sand. And sometimes the ground just freezes and thaws and you get some little cracks, and those become a bigger problem. So once that occurs, then we are required to fix that either under pressure. If we can't fix it under pressure or it drops below a certain level, then we have to provide a boil water advisory or notification to the customers. The same requirement if we have an instance where we have to completely shut the water off, which, in some cases we have to put whole new strips of pipe in, thereby, cutting these off with the valves. So the pop-up here comes from a guidance document that the Division of Water has put together from 2014. So a lot of things have changed since 2014. I don't know that it says revised, but to include Facebook and Twitter, social media, tells me they may have tweaked that a little bit since then. But the keywords are shall and or. So the water system shall notify the public. And we typically use doorknob hangers up until about 2019, and we continue to do so as part of our notification system. The problem in Oldham County is that we don't have any daily newspapers. We don't have access to TV, radio. We also don't have a social media presence as an organization. So when we go to notify customers, we do that with a door hanging or a sheet that we tape up and provide. We have asked the Division of Water, it says shall notify in the word or. Does that mean that if we created a map environment or a robocall that we were able to connect with, positively show that we connect with customers to let them know, does that comply? And the answer is, well, it depends, or we don't know, or we'll look and see, but we've never got a definitive answer as to will our map system that you're about to see qualify for meeting that law. So hanging the door hangers, and I'll show you an example of what the quote unquote door hanger is shortly, can be problematic when you have a large outage. So we have a staff of 20 people, our field staff, around 10 to 12. And not everyone's on call on a weekend or available. So if we have to go around, I think the largest outage that we've had since I've been here in the last 5 years was about 375 people in the northwestern part of the county. And that's a lot of doors to go knocking on. And that was really what prompted us to evaluate how can we do this better. And it through when the conversation started, we started looking at these robocalls or the calling systems. And then the question was asked, well, can we do something with the map? And that brought us into some solution research. So we looked at some third-party applications, mobile vendors. We talked to the folks that we have our customer information system, what they had available. There was going to be some upgrades, money-wise, very costly to upgrade our current system to attach that portion of the alert system or the mobile application, and they didn't really mesh well with the Esri products. So we looked at a couple different other vendors, and all of them required some sort of an upgrade or some sort of substantial investment of funds, and nothing was really a complete package. It didn't work or flow the way we were hoping it would and encompass all of our needs. So when the map question was asked, I looked at the Esri products, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with the solutions. Those have evolved quite a bit extensively over the last few years. And one of those solutions is the water utility solution. So within that one, I was able to find this drinking water advisory solution. And as you can see, it has been moved since 2019 to mature support. I like the way that Esri codifies deprecated or use the new stuff by calling it mature support, but that's all good. So that's this one has evolved well, but we still originated with this as our basic package to build on. And so the implementation piece of it, we wanted to create something that was very simple for both the staff who were going to input the information and then the public side of it as well. And Pro is where I started, and I grabbed the layers, the minimal number of layers that I needed. And from our infrastructure piece, we didn't want to include everything. We have about 22 layers of infrastructure that we maintain, update, and keep current through a digital capture in the field using high accuracy GNSS and mobile devices and field maps application. But we didn't need to show everything. So what I did was also draw on some web services that already exist, so we did not have to maintain things like the parcels and the addresses layer. All that comes from our Oldham County Planning and Zoning. And so the idea was to leverage what we could, don't maintain anything except the most needed stuff. And so part of that package solution was this boil water advisory layer that came with it. And then I just symbolized that to show where this area of interest would be. So that then became a web map. And I created the layers again that we needed from our system, which included water meter, the water valves, and the water mains in our service area. I would like to point out, as a late addition here in the last 6 months, we created this view became available for your layers. And I created that in order to allow our staff, when they go out and determine what valves may need to be turned off in order to isolate the problem or to correct the problem, this view allows them to actually edit in the field through the Field Maps app or through a laptop, computer, tablet, what valves are off. And so once we fix this rupture or break in service, then we know that, okay, make sure that we get all these turned back on. So that's one of the additional things that we've done since this initial, the first creation or rollout of this particular tool. So got those added to the web map, and then we looked to Web App Builder, selected a template that was able to, I was able to logically have some steps or flow to. And so the first step, it kind of moves from left to right here in the table of contents, where they choose the layers that they want to display or look at. And this is on the staff side. So the author is building this boil water area, and you turn the layers on. We can use addresses, water meters, mains, valves, and this is the interface that you see as you're beginning this process. And here I've highlighted, or I'd searched for an address, which is our office address. And you can see their valves and the parcels and the addresses. So that's our initial view. And then we move to the next tab, which is selecting the area itself, the boil water area. And I'm just checking my notes to make sure I'm not skipping anything. So we get to the editor. Smart Editor is the tool that's being used here. And you would select this and then begin to draw around these using the parcels as much as possible to create that boil water advisory area. And I'll show that to you momentarily what that looks like, because you then trace the area to select the meters as well. So once you select or draw that footprint, then this Smart Editor opens up, and these are the things that we add in attribution for the public to view. So we put our date, what type of issue, some comments about, we've had a contractor strike our system, we're fixing it. The other thing is we can use this for pre-planning or pre-alerts to certain projects. So if we know we're going to be cutting off an area of customers, we can put in here, a day or two ahead of time, hey, this is the area that will be affected by this new construction or this maintenance construction that's going to be occurring. And then we can also attach copies of the actual door hanger, quote unquote, by choosing a file. And a door hanger, this is actually what we refer to as a door hanger. It's a form that we have available, and we just fill in the blanks, and it accommodates or meets what the requirements are for information from KAR 8020. And this gets handed out to every customer that's being affected. So now we've defined our boil water area, and this is what that area looks like. And this is an actual recent rupture that we had in the southern part of our service area. And so you can see here that we just simply identified the addresses and our meters are what is highlighted at this point. So this is a step beyond that. But we traced our outage area, and then we use this third tab, which is the select tool, and we make sure that water meters are checked. And in this case, we had 82 customers or 82 meters that were being affected by this particular break. And we use the select tool to essentially trace the same area, the BWA area, and that's what causes these meters to highlight. And so then we use the little dots here and we export that to a CVS file. And that CVS file is cleaned up. There's some information there that we don't need for our robocall system. But within a matter of minutes, we can clean that particular file up. That can be emailed into our to our folks up front, and they can run through the robocall, get that set up and going so that people are notified quickly. So then we move to what the public sees. And on our website, I've highlighted our water outage alert map link. So a person, if they're experiencing water issues, cloudy water, dirty water, low water pressure, no water, we're trying to publicize the access to this particular map. So they get that link, and then this is what they see on the presentation side. And this is just another, this is actually the boil water template that came with that solution. And we've copied the information from our door hanger, telling them how to use the water. We also have a legend provided, and the info, you'll see that momentarily. But this is the area that you just saw that we had drawn in from the authoring side of it. And as they zoom in, so if you had a question about, is there a boil water in my location, then, or an issue with the water system, you can type your address in, and then that will, I picked one that would zoom to this particular area, and it will zoom in. And you'll notice as the map zooms to that location, not only is their address highlighted, but they also have some imagery and some street names to reference, you know, to confirm that they are in fact a part of the issue that's going on. Love you too, Step Row. So as part of that information system, again, you saw the input side of the information. This is just what that represents. And it describes what's happening. We refer them to the details tab to see how to use the water. Sometimes we'll put you know, different information. There's not a custom message here. It's situation or event dependent. And then the attachment here that they can click and actually view that door hanger. So as part of this whole workflow, I did create a document, operations guide, how step-by-step walks them through every piece of creating this boil water advisory, publishing it, as well as how to go back and turn the valves on and off, as well as clear, delete that particular area so that we don't show that there's an issue. And we have several people that are trained to use this, so I'm not the weak point of the system. If I'm on vacation, they don't have to call me to do it. However, I can if it's a large event. You know, I have been called up and asked, hey, are you in a place you can draw this? And they'll tell me where it's at. And because we just don't have the bodies to get everything done as quickly as we want. So that goes to the first point. The workflow is based within ArcGIS Online completely. Once it's authored in Pro, moved up to the cloud, then everything can be done by logging in through AGOL. So internet access really is all that's needed. Laptops, tablets, cell phones, it's a little bulky to work with the cell phone, but it can be done with little practice. Tablets a little less so, and obviously laptops and computers, desktops are the ideal way to do that. We did have an enterprise system where we had Arc server at one time, but we are now completely AGOL. So a big part of what we do are solutions that we incorporate and build. We want to put those up in AGOL, and again, kind of remove some more complicated aspects of trying to do something like this. Our future efforts is, one is that we want to implement the valve trace template that's in part of the ArcGIS solutions for water. And that way you can select a point on the map where the break is, and it will automatically determine what valves need to be turned off, as well as how many meters are being affected. And we're hoping to tie that into our advisory map. And what that does for us, right now we're trying to clean the data up to make sure that that trace template or that trace tool will work. So you need to have some data quality there, and we're cleaning up as best we can in order to get to that particular function. So with that, I think I'm doing pretty good on time. Appreciate everyone's attendance and interest. Hopefully this will spark some sort of creativity. If anyone's doing something similar or better, I'm always open to ideas and thoughts. I appreciate Christy Powell's Power Automate session yesterday, because it got me to thinking about a couple things. And if one of us gets to the end game before the other, then we all like to share some of those tools and efforts. With that, I appreciate Camp Alignment to attend, or to present rather, and I appreciate Precision for sponsoring. And I will take some questions and give folks a little bit of time back. So Charles or Andrew?
I'm on here. Yeah, does anyone have any questions for Kenny? I just see a thank you in the chat from Jeremy Kurtz. Again, also, I didn't think you mentioned this, Kenny, but I know that you lead a Slack for utility users. I think everybody should check that out if they want to communicate. Often what happens with us in the utility industry is we kind of need to adapt GIS in different ways than some other people. So Kenny has been an invaluable resource to me for that. So hit him up, bother him on Slack. I believe you're still on mute, Kenny. It would also appear you're still on mute, Kenny. There you go. Now you're off mute.
Okay, there's too many buttons for mute. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay, sorry about that. I've got the screen button, I've got the button on my ear set. So yes, phone number, email there. Happy to answer questions or help with anything. Reach out and touch me. I always say, if you can't find me, it's your own darn fault, because I'm not trying to hide, at least not yet. That may come in the future. But thank you all for, yes, let me, Rebecca, let me get that sorted up here, and I will put that Slack information there. And I appreciate all the kudos that are coming in. And again, hopefully somebody can use this. So.
All right, thanks, Kenny. I guess I will ask, do we need any more housekeeping, Andrew, or should I just get ready to roll with the next presentation?
I think let's go ahead and wait and give people a few minutes. So we have 2:30 on the schedule, so it would be good for those that want to, that are coming in a little bit later, to be here at 2:30 when we start up. So yeah, we'll give folks about 5 minutes. Stretch your legs, get some water.
5 minutes of your time back. How dare you?
And but the next presentation will be in this room, so don't go anywhere. I'll go ahead and share my screen to make sure that people know that they are in the right place. All right. Can we see?
We've had another question trickle in, Kenny, if you still would like to respond to that. I'm not too familiar with the aquifers monitoring, but maybe you are.
So can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, yeah, I was actually just typing a message there to Cynthia. So yes, there are lots of monitoring and safeguards. Everything is under pressure, which as long as we maintain that pressure, there's no possibility of the backflows, or especially the aquifers. We have a lot of safeguards at that source point. And under pressure, when you have anything bigger than a 6-inch pipe that ruptures under pressure, it can be pretty impressive. We've had some larger pipes, and some of them so large that if they did massively or erupt abruptly, that someone could probably seriously get hurt or killed. So we do maintain those safeguards, and we have a lot of monitors in place.
All righty. Thanks for all the questions, guys. It's been great. Pretty interactive. Catch you in 5.
Thanks, Charles.
Can I get a thumbs up from someone to see if they can see the right screen, the broadband mapping advocacy? All right, thank you.
All righty. I'm back back over here. Just let me know when to start, Andrew.
It's 2:30. Let's do it. I need some
Okay.
intro music whenever we're doing that, some sort of elevator music. Anyway, take it away, Charles. Thanks.
All right, bonjour again, everybody. We're here in Versailles. Welcome back to the camp conference. Coming up next here, once again, this session is sponsored by Precision Products and our friends over in Louisville there. Call Eric Muncie if you have any GPSing needs. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce Ashley. Ashley over there, I didn't realize this. I guess, are you president-elect of EURESA, Ashley? Was that correct? Did I read your bio?
Yes, that'll actually start next week.
Oh my goodness. Well, we are in the presence of greatness. Anyway, Ashley, she's going to present here today on broadband. So take it away.
Absolutely. All right. All right, just getting the share going. All right, Charles, can you confirm that we are good to go on the screen share?
Right now we're black. Give it a second, see if it goes. It might take a second. Oh, It says that you're trying to share, but it's not actually showing the share. Let's see. Try shutting it off and back on again. Classic IT move.
All right, it is completely frozen on me.
Oh, that happened. All right, well, let's get it going here. We'll be just a second, everyone. Don't worry.
Let me see if I can I'll screen share again, see if I can stop your side and then see if you can take it back. Let's do that.
Let's give it a shot. And
stop share. There we go. Okay, now give it another try. There we go.
All right, now it's working?
Yep, you're good. Give it a
Fantastic. All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be here back at the Kentucky GIS conference. Today I've got a presentation on broadband mapping advocacy to connect every resident. Certainly, as the past year and a half or so has proven, internet access has been more important than ever. And at Connected Nation, we've been working on that this is our 20-year anniversary this year, and I've been at Connected Nation for 14 years now. So continuing to work on closing the digital divide, working on all types of a holistic approach to broadband access, adoption, and use. So rolling right in. Some of the topics I want to cover real quick, just in terms of broadband mapping and some of the differences between how we approach the actual technology use of that. Some of the data set challenges that exist with how the data is currently collected, especially at the federal level. I'll review some state success stories, some of the things that states have been doing on an individual level while the federal data is getting in a better position. Also want to look at field validation, similar to what Kenny was just talking about, being able to use field maps and other applications to collect data directly from the field with our engineering teams. And then lastly, I'll close up with some of the advocacy and legislative actions that have been happening recently. You may have heard there's all types of different programs available, all different kinds of funding from Congress and other agencies. And so reviewing some of those actions as well, and then can open it up for questions. The first thing that I wanted to kind of have a quick disclaimer about in terms of the broadband mapping is looking at last mile broadband mapping versus what's known as middle mile or backhaul broadband. And so the image on the left is last mile, or the actual connection into your house. Middle mile is what enables that connection. So if you've got, if you see telecom equipment outside your house, if you see it on your street, that has to go somewhere to a node, a marker, a cabinet, and then getting back to the connection to the actual internet itself. So the image on the right is that backhaul. Where are those interconnection points between the backbone of the internet? But today we're going to focus more specifically on the image on the left, the last mile broadband, the residential broadband service, if you will. And then just another quick slide, just in terms of looking at what types of things are we talking about when we talk about broadband, because there are different types. Currently, the FCC definition is 25 meg down and 3 meg up. So depending on where you are, how many devices you have connected, what type of Wi-Fi router you have, that might be sufficient and it may not be. But currently that is the federal standard definition that is being followed right now. And then just a few images on the different types of technology. Today, we're going to focus on what we refer to as fixed broadband, or anything that's a cable, a fiber, a DSL, or a fixed wireless connection, something that is connected to a solid place, rather than a mobile broadband connection that goes with you wherever you are. In terms of some of our data set challenges, currently the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, they have a Form 477 where providers are required to twice a year submit data to them on where are they currently offering broadband services. And they do have an interactive map available with statistics, with different searches and different parameters that you can look at. However, there are some challenges with this information, and unfortunately, it's inadequate for local planning purposes. So if you are looking to find out where the people that are served and unserved in my local community, unfortunately, this doesn't get as detailed as we would like to be able to truly expand service to all those people. Some of the primary challenges that we see within this data is that not all broadband providers are submitting data as required. There are some that are missing from this data collection, even though they offer telecom services and are supposed to be filing this. This next challenge is kind of silly, given who we are and what we do. You know, not all providers have GIS capabilities. And given how we spend our time and what we do as GIS professionals, that may seem kind of ridiculous, honestly, that there is an industry that is so ingrained with location that doesn't use location intelligence as part of their daily operations. But we have found that there are a number of broadband providers that do not have GIS systems or any type of geospatial data or information on where their network can physically reach, who are the households that I can serve, and then being able to actually file this form with the FCC. One other issue is that the fixed broadband data is filed currently as a CSV file only. So it's literally just a list of census blocks that are served by different codes, different technologies, different speeds, and there's not a mapping or visualization component to it. So when providers file this data, they're just looking at a series of numbers and information rather than being able to look at it on a map and go, oh wait, I don't serve that area, I should fix that. So that's another challenge we're seeing. Fixed wireless services are also filed as census blocks. If you've seen some of the large mobile wireless carrier maps like AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, if you've seen those types of map where you can actually see the footprint of where they reach, the same thing is true of how we model fixed wireless and what those propagations might look like. And so when those are converted to census block list and are filed in that way as well, we're missing that visualization component and the level of detail that can be in those propagation files. There's inherent overstatement with using census blocks as the unit of measure. As we know, looking at census blocks, the more rural an area might be, the larger these census blocks are going to be. So unfortunately, if even one household has telecom or broadband services available, the entire block is lit up on this FCC map as having some level of service, but you don't know if it's 1% or 100%. So there's inherent overstatement with where the people on the periphery of this service, because telecom networks are completely independent of census block boundaries. So we always run the risk of that overstatement existing there. We also find that there are understatement issues because of that missing provider data. Those either those providers that are not filing or the providers that might be incorrectly filing, because again, they're not looking at it on a map. They're not seeing which areas are or are not being filed on that map. The other issue is we're seeing is that the data can be old by the time it's published. Currently, the most recent data that is available from the FCC is from June 2020. And so there has been a lot of build out over the past year, but that data is not yet available to us for use. And then we're also seeing that provider data is not thoroughly validated. So as providers are working through this process, there's not a lot of double checks on that system. There's not field validation looking at that information to go, wow, this may not be exactly correct, or this needs to be fixed, or hey, this isn't logical as far as the way a telecom network should function. Just a couple examples of some of the kind of the actual visualization of the issues that we're seeing so here we've got an example of a town service area. So let's say, for instance, there's a cable provider that has a franchise agreement with a town or a city that they will serve anybody within those boundaries. Anybody can call up and get connected to that service, or they will build it out to that location. However, when we have to convert that to census blocks, city boundaries, city limits, town boundaries, they are not always connected to those census block boundaries. So in cases where we actually select those census blocks, we are overstating automatically where that provider can offer service. So we're already seeing some of the overstatement issues of where service physically is available. We have a similar issue if a provider manages their network by what roads they can serve. So if they're able to highlight or maintain which roads they're able to offer broadband services on, regardless of the technology, again, you convert that to a census block representation and you're severely overstating, especially with some of the unique boundaries or boundary characteristics that some of these census blocks have. You're getting a huge level of overstatement already within the data without even getting to the parts that are even accurate or inaccurate. Last one I want to show here is with a fixed wireless propagation versus census block level. So here on the left, we're looking at the actual footprint, theoretical footprint of where a fixed wireless service could reach. So our engineers will take information on tower locations or other vertical assets, looking at what type of equipment is used, what frequency, spectrum, and all types of parameters, somewhere between 25 and 30 different individual parameters for every single tower, and then be able to actually produce this radio frequency analysis to show where is that signal likely to reach and at what speeds by tower, by asset. And then again, once you convert that to the census block, you're severely overstating where that service is physically available. A couple other things we want to look at is, whereas we're looking at the pure inherent overstatement in those previous slides, here we've got actual 477 data that has been analyzed. And just a couple examples of this, the image on the far left is showing actual process census block data that was filed by a fiber provider. And we worked with them independently of census blocks and said, all right, let's create a boundary of where your actual service area is. If any one of these houses within this area calls you, where would you be able to immediately go, yes, we will be there within 7 to 10 days to install. So the image in the middle in green is their actual service area, totally independent of census blocks. And then if we look at what should that conversion have looked like for their actual filing of census blocks, that is the image on the right. So comparing the two on the outside, we're seeing blocks that were filed that should not have been and blocks that weren't filed that should have been. So you've got overstatement and understatement just within this one provider, this one technology. And this next one always gets a little bit interesting because here we're looking at a fixed wireless provider. The image on the left is the census blocks that they filed. And unfortunately, there are some provider billing systems that indicate they can export this data for them to submit to the FCC. Unfortunately, this is not a representation of deployment or where the broadband is actually accessible. This is unfortunately based on subscription data. So these are only the census blocks where this provider had a customer located. And so those are the only ones that got filed. So again, the green in the middle, we worked with the provider to create their actual service area based on all of their assets and infrastructure. And then the blue on the right is what their 477 filing should have looked like if they were filing all of the census blocks that actually have some level of service within them. So again, we're seeing different levels of overstatement, understatement, inaccuracies in the data. And then of course that's compiled or compounded because we're looking at about 3,000 or so broadband providers across the entire country. Another example I've got here, so we have done some comparative analyses looking at where the 477 data says that broadband is available. And so we did a study in Walton County, Florida, that looked at these areas in like the orangey gold color are where the FCC data said broadband service was available with speeds of at least 25 by 30. And so we had engineering teams drive every single road in the county, marking telecom assets and infrastructure to be able to produce what's really there. And so zoomed in here, the areas in purple on top of the gold are where you actually had services that were available to connect households. So all of the gold that we can still see is overstatement. And we found areas that were not reported as having service, but that we found evidence that there truly is service. So again, levels of overstatement and understatement, which really becomes an issue when there are different federal subsidies going out to different areas. And this data is the basis for eligibility or determining who's unserved or underserved to be able to distribute those funds. So now I want to move into some of our state success stories. So the approach that we have taken for broadband mapping activities is kind of a four-pronged approach. We have a lot of independent research that we are doing. A lot of our engineers on our engineering and technical services team, some of them are former broadband providers themselves. So they are very familiar with some of the operations of a smaller broadband company. What does their network operations look like? What are some of the questions that we should be asking? And what are some of those data sets and other resources we can look into to really try to figure out where broadband services are available? We also maintain provider relationships. So when we do a state broadband mapping project, we are reaching out to all of those providers across the state, working with them on what is the purpose of the project, what is the objective, how would we use their data or whatever information they may have to create these maps and really try to understand where the gaps are. So we maintain those relationships. We also have that engineering team go out into the field and confirm broadband services. And so any of the data that we receive or find or map, we are constantly wanting to refine that information. So our engineers will go out in the field, make notes of where they find additional overstatement, any other issues with the data, new construction that needs to be taken into account. And we'll also circle back with the providers that we've built those relationships with so that they know where we've found issues, because a lot of times they want to make sure that their information is more accurate and up to date too. So that information goes back to those providers as well. And then the last part of it is we collect resident feedback. So anytime a map is published, we are wanting people to kind of throw darts at it. Let us know where there are problems. If you go and check it out and you look up your address and you see a provider listed there and you go, no, I called that provider, they don't serve me, they stop a quarter mile down the road. We want to get that feedback so that we can edit the data, so that we can truly figure out here are the gaps, here are the people in the areas that need the most assistance to get connected to the internet. So next few slides, I've got some examples of what has been happening in some of the states we've been working with. Here on this slide, we're looking at Texas in terms of different speeds. And so left to right, we're looking at slower speeds. We actually start this map collection at 10x1 speeds, so 10 meg down and 1 meg up. And then as we get higher and higher speeds, the less areas that actually have service. And so if the FCC were to increase the minimum speed to be considered broadband or high-speed internet service, what would the picture look like then? And then how many people are going to be unserved at that level or that definition? We have interactive maps available for all of the state projects that we're working on too. We also have some community and county level projects, but users are going to be able to enter in their address or click a location on the map to get that list of providers and query that database to see what technologies should be available, what speeds should be available, and then we have a link to just a simple web form for them to let us know if they're checking this out and something is wrong. Maybe their address shows up in the wrong spot. Again, they've checked into some of that service and it's not available. They can let us know so that we can refine that information. We also do several different analyses on the data once we get it collected at different speeds. Here, this map is looking at the density of providers. And so the darker the color that appears here, the more provider selection a customer will have. And so certainly the lighter the areas, the less competition there is. And so this has been important for different states as well to look at kind of the next step, hey, after we get everybody connected, do we want to make sure that people have access to more than one provider? What does that situation look like? Turning to Michigan now, one of the interesting things that happened certainly in the last year and a half was as students were sent home for remote work, learning, what happens when those students don't have the internet at home, whether because it doesn't exist or because there is some other barrier to adoption. They don't have a computer, it's too expensive. there's too many people trying to use their internet connection, and it's not solid enough to handle 7 different devices at a time for parents that are teleworking as well as students who are trying to do their education. So this map is looking at a selected school district in Michigan, and the green, the very, very few and far between green spots that are on the map, is broadband service. And so we're looking at a huge part of that school district that did not have broadband access. Taking it a step further, this is the inverse. And so now we're looking at the census blocks that don't have broadband available to them. And the darker the pink, the higher the density of unserved households there are. And then also marking out areas that don't have any population or any households, so that efforts can be focused on where are the most children that need that connection to be able to continue their educational activities. On a related note, when the pandemic first started, Michigan wanted to get a light application produced of where Wi-Fi hotspots were available. And so this is a light application available on phones that people in the state could go and search for, what's the nearest Wi-Fi location to me? Is there a library or a municipal building or somebody who's got a parking lot or something that's open late that I can connect to their network to do my work, my schoolwork? If somebody submitted information on a Wi-Fi hotspot and it's got a different network name or a password, we were including that information too. So we had a form going for people to submit information to us on who had a Wi-Fi hotspot available that they wanted to make different users across the state aware of, and then also having this application for people to find, hey, where's the closest spot to me where I can get Wi-Fi access? Just one more thing on Michigan. One of the things that they had done in the northeast part of the state was looking at an asset map. So being able to say, here's where broadband services that are available. We want to connect those unserved areas, but where are there already assets available? Are there water tanks or towers or grain silos or utility poles? What assets are available that could potentially be used for broadband services? Could we put equipment on there? Do they already have power? Do they have backhaul internet available to them to help handle some of the capacity or the load of adding new equipment on there? So you're trying to, instead of constructing a brand new tower, having to do an environmental impact study, perhaps there's already an asset already available that we can put new equipment on to get more service to more people. Minnesota is another state that has been doing a lot of great things in broadband mapping and has a grant program available and has for several years in a row now. So they are actually taking the maps, identifying those unserved areas, and then making funds available from their state legislature to expand broadband services. And so providers will apply for funds, specific areas they're going to serve, and all of that is tracked in terms of where is construction going to be completed, where is it in progress, where is it already done, and then we actually go out in the field and validate that everything has been built out to the way it was applied for. Iowa is another example where some interactive maps have been created for where different technologies and different speeds are available. And similarly, they have a grant program as well. So they use the inverse of the broadband availability data in here, which is represented as the maroon color. So those are all the areas that don't have broadband service. But then their grant program is based on census blocks. And so any block that is at least 90% unserved is made eligible for their grant program. And so they're using that information to help highlight to providers that might be nearby, hey, if you extended your service, we might be able to get X number of households connected that haven't been yet. A few quick slides on some of the field validation work that we do. So looking here, we have created different interactive maps that are based on some field maps data collection using that software and information for our engineers to physically collect information. So here we're looking at assets and infrastructure. This is in Lake Cities, Texas. It's actually quite populated, but they were trying to figure out exactly where some of their infrastructure and assets were so they could identify capacity issues. And so our engineers, again, drove every road within this area and identified and captured and took pictures of every asset, who owns it, is it aerial, is it underground, so that the town can look at this and try to figure out, oh, hey, where are our gaps? Where are the people that still need connections, and be able to produce this even more detailed version of broadband mapping. And then when we produce some of these broadband maps and we actually go out into the field, the image on the left is looking at an application area. So the orange is where a provider applied for a grant to serve, and this is where they were going to build out. And so then we went through and drove all the roads within there, tracked the assets and infrastructure to ensure that the build out occurred before they get their final payment from the state. And we do similar things where we're taking pictures of each of the assets, tracking where the infrastructure, if it's fiber, where was it buried? Similarly for copper or DSL, or I'm sorry, copper or cable. And then on the wireless side, we're doing similar activities. We are trying to figure out where is the infrastructure, where are those assets located? We want to be able to produce that image that's in the middle in the green of where can the services physically meet. And then the picture in the bottom, the center, is actually from a spectrum analyzer. So we will take equipment out into the field, we will measure the signal strength of a wireless offering to make sure that the signal that's used and everything that we're tracking is actually capable of the speeds that have been reported. So we're tracking all of that activity as well. Just a couple quick things on advocacy and legislative actions, because there is so much. We actually started a page on our website that goes through all of the different broadband funding programs right now, because there are a lot. Last time I checked, we were thinking it was about $366 billion that is currently available for broadband activities across the country. And that doesn't include some of the infrastructure package stuff that is going on in Congress right now. But different federal opportunities with the FCC, the USDA, NTIA, the Treasury, some of those rules that literally just got published last week of how states can use some of that funding for broadband activities. And then there's different state actions. A lot of states have different grant programs for expanding broadband services. There are different broadband task forces, feasibility studies that are being done. And of course, as we know, all of these opportunities are going to require good data, because as we've seen, bad data in, bad data out, you're focusing on the wrong areas for productive work. One of the things that is being done, so I mentioned all the data set issues with what the FCC has been doing. In 2020, the Broadband Data Act was passed by Congress, and that prompted the FCC to then start completely restructuring their program. And so a lot of reports and information have come out. And so the FCC is working to currently implement that program, which is going to be a complete shift. Census blocks are going to be gone. It's going to be some address level data. We're looking at actually having geospatial files that will be submitted by the providers on where their service areas actually are. So we're going to get a lot more granular once this data is available. So this will hopefully replace the Form 477 data at some point. They are in several different rounds of kind of going through the technical parameters of what has to be submitted, what's it going to look like. So there's still some questions in the air about exactly what the timing is going to look like on this, but we're hoping that within the next 12 to 18 months, some new data sets will be available that'll be a lot more accurate and detailed than what has been produced previously. I know I ran through that kind of quickly, but if anybody's got any questions, I'm happy to take them. And I've also got a link to an Esri ARC user article that was published last year, certainly looking at COVID versus broadband mapping and some of the activities we have going on as well. So Charles, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Ashley. I'm not sure how many people remember this, but I actually as well used to work in GIS for broadband for an engineering firm that was contracted out. And my only comment to that would be is we had one very large service provider across the country who had their GIS data, or I should say their customer data, still in MicroStation. So that was quite an undertaking. Looks like we do have a question in the chat. Like an IT, this is from Jeremy Kurtz, like an IT admin tracks ISP numbers and traffic connected to a LAN or WAN system, could a provider use control towers / distribution points in a provider network? Boy. Decipher traffic from a MUX at each distribution point in a provider network, pull geographic point data to use for spatial analysis or comparison. Whew.
Yeah, that one's really technical on the network operations side. Unfortunately, I'm probably gonna have to pass on that question, just in terms of how technical and detailed that is on the network operations side. We are Our focus and objective has been more on the service availability side. So even if a provider could get that level of detail that we could work with, that's what we would be trying to do. So if a provider has something that says, here's our service area boundary, whether that's a PDF map or, you know, a KMZ or a shapefile. I know we've always joked that we get everything from the drawing on the back of a napkin to a shapefile, because we literally got a drawing on the back of a napkin one time, because it was all in this one person's head. He was the guy. He did all their installation. He knew where everything was. So we try to remain as flexible as possible for what type of data a provider may have that we can collect from them. So if they were able to do some type of network analysis that on their own system to be able to provide to us, or you know, whatever that might look like. But I personally don't have any of the technical specifics of a provider physically going that route to analyze their own network.
Thanks, Ashley. Yeah, we also have a question in from Kurt Bynum, and I can also speak to this too, but it says, are broadband providers reluctant to provide timely update of facility locations due to perceived proprietary commercial info?
It's getting better. So with this new system or this new program, I should say, that the FCC is going to have, providers are becoming more forthcoming with that information and those updates. It's kind of, you know, some states have had like a carrot or a stick approach in terms of mandatory participation or voluntary for their different grant programs and their broadband mapping. But in terms of some of these federal subsidies that providers are getting millions of dollars to expand into some of these unserved areas, they have to report back on all of these address locations that they now serve. And so one of the issues that they've had is that they're supposed to submit the coordinates of the new addresses in that system. And so certainly depending on if they actually, as the technicians were out connecting these locations, if they were getting GPS coordinates for these houses as they made connections, or if they were geocoding later, one of the issues is that when some of that data is validated and yet a different geocoder is used, there's some conflict as far as which one's correct. And so some of the providers have said, you know, we need to have a more authoritative broadband database on addresses, so that if somebody says 123 Main Street, here's where 123 Main Street is, not a collection of 6 different points within 500, 1500 feet of each other, or even larger, certainly in some rural areas. So a lot of those providers that have been reluctant have been kind of pushing for this new system of address-based information, so that they're not at risk at losing some of their subsidy monies because of that conflict.
Thanks again, Ashley. And yeah, I do think broadband is getting better, but it did start off very GIS low tech. But yeah, I think this is a good presentation. Do we have any other questions? I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. No, just a bunch of thanks in the comments section. I also want to take this chance to once again thank our sponsor for this room, which was Precision Products. They're based in Louisville. They can provide your GPS equipment needs. And we have another round of presentations coming up at 3:30. Those will be on using GIS to create connections and accountability from donors, and everything you need to know about 911. So those should be really good. And then don't forget, tonight we also have a social. I need to bring up the time so I don't say it wrong, because I've already said it wrong twice in my head. At 5 o'clock, we have a Mapathon social. So thanks for coming on, Ashley. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we let everyone go?
No, I think I'm good to go, but if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out. Happy to answer any that I can, or point people in other directions if that's where the data happens to be.
Oh, we got one more.
Okay.
Is provider overlap accounted for in the system, i.e. 3 providers in my area, but I only use one?
Yes. So for the mapping that we do, we are trying to be the most comprehensive and have all of the information available. So working with each individual provider, each individual technology, each individual speed, to then produce different maps to say, you know, is there 0 providers here, or are there 5? So we're definitely working on that type of analysis as well. So our broadband maps definitely take that into account. There are some other maps that are produced, like if we see a speed test map. Certainly, you know, I'm only subscribing to one broadband provider. I have multiple choices though, but my speed tests are only ever going to show one specific provider available. But yeah, our broadband maps, we try to very much focus on being as comprehensive as possible for all the possibilities.
All right, thanks again, Ashley. All right, barring anything else from the, I guess, is Andrew technically the MC if I'm the co-host? I don't know how that works.
Oh, you're doing a great job on both parts. Nope, we're good.
All right, we'll go ahead and give you all a 30-minute break and see you all back here at 3:30. Just click on the agenda for the next session.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone.